Okay, it's time for a new speaking simulator. This is a part two. Our contestant, our subject is Mr. Rahul, and I'm going to start by explaining what you're looking at here. This is my version of a check sheet. This is something teachers use, and I assume also examiners use to some extent when they are looking at the band descriptors. I have changed the order a little bit. Usually this here, fluency and coherence, is first. But I wanted to think of a meme or a mnemonic, a way to remember the four band descriptors. So we start with grammar. And then lexical, LR, appropriate vocabulary, lexical resource, appropriate, P. And then fluency and coherence is sort of a strange band descriptor because they're two different things. And so I called it immediate and integrated. Integrated means that they're connected. Topical answers to the question. And then pronunciation, sound. So you put it all together and it's gravitas. A good task, a good speaking performance has gravitas. Not in the literal way of gravitas, which is a cool word in and of itself, but that's how I like to look at it. So, what you did well. You recognized, okay, so here, grammar clues from the question. You're asked to tell a story. And when you're asked to tell a story, you need to use all of the narrative tenses. We have plenty of examples of past continuous, past simple, past perfect, all being used appropriately. So a variety of tenses and structures, a lot of complex sentences, Most sentences were completely error-free. Some other grammar features used. Future forms. I don't know if that's right. You said used to. Comparatives. They might have been in there. But again, you would have been able to have done all of these things in an entire speaking task. Reported speech, not so much, but there were some relative clauses as well. Okay, moving on. Wide range of vocabulary, yes. Didn't need to paraphrase. Collocation's great. No problems with word forms. Spoke at length, no hesitation. You didn't repeat yourself. Check, 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 all the way through the fluency and coherence. Now, pronunciation, yes, easy to understand. Natural sounding. Actually, I'm going to unclick that. It sounded a bit rehearsed. I don't know. Accent, little effect, except on certain words. And then there were some consonant cluster problems. Now, what I would like to have seen more is here in the pronunciation features, and I'll get to that when we listen to your performance. Some specific notes, well, we'll go over these in the second half as we hit play, and well, let's see if I can do this. Can I?
So here I would like to talk about an instance
still
where
recording.
I could not speak a foreign language. This happened about 5 years ago, and it happened about 6 months after I had come to China. I had originally come to China to pursue my tertiary education. So when I got my first summer vacation,
Okay, I messed up there. I hit the wrong stop button. I meant to hit stop down here, and I hit it on the recording itself. Okay, so a good beginning, some notes. You're open. I would like to talk about. Yes, that's fine. That is a future form, I suppose. It's more like a I want. I would rather have heard I'm going to talk about. That's a true future form. Okay, now I got a little bit confused here about come, gone, went, because I made an assumption that you were living not in China, but you live in China now, so it was actually accurate.
foreign language. This happened about 5 years ago, and it happened about 6 months after I had come to China. I had originally come to China to pursue my tertiary education.
Okay, there's a bit of a pronunciation issue. Okay, it's good vocabulary, but repeat after me. Tertiary. I know there's an A in there, but we don't say tertiary. Tertiary is That's like an American would say that. Well, I'm an American, but it's tertiary. Repeat after me. Tertiary, tertiary education. It was pretty incomprehensible here, where you said
I had originally come to China to pursue my tertiary education. So,
retrogression. Huh?
so when I got my first summer vacation, I decided to head back home. For that, I had to take a flight from Beijing International Airport, since the place where I am staying currently, named Chengdu, didn't have an airport at that time.
Okay, again, I didn't know where you were now, so that was kind of confusing. The place where I currently am staying didn't have an airport at that time. Okay, okay. Yeah. Where you're currently staying really doesn't enter into the story, but it was kind of confusing.
So I had to take a train from Chengdu to Beijing and then
Good use of past modals. Had to.
board the flight from there. So once I got off the train in Beijing railway station, I headed down to the airport. While I was waiting in
Good.
queue
Headed down.
for checking in for my international flight, I realized that I had forgotten to take my passport from my train.
That's a masterful grammar sentence there. Excellent sentence. While I was waiting in the queue, past continuous, I realized, past simple, that I had forgotten to take my passport from the train. All three narrative tenses in one sentence. Very well done.
So I was quite worried and anxious at the same time
I have a hard time actually distinguishing what the difference is between worried and anxious. So I'm worried and anxious at the same time. Okay.
because passport was the only means of identity for me as
Only means of identification.
I was a foreigner in China. So I had to rush back to the railway station
Rush
and
back.
I
Good.
told the officials about my situation. They could not
Officials.
understand me because I was speaking in English and the Chinese people over there could not comprehend my English language.
The Chinese people over there could not comprehend my kind of a bit wordy. Because well, we know they're Chinese. They didn't understand English. You got a little complicated and it sounded confusing. It sounded something almost anti-Chinese.
So I had to use Google Translate instead to convey.
Whoa, what was that? Okay, that's kind of a mouthful. Google Translate something, but it was not clear. Let's see, can I move this? Okay, well, let's keep going. Ah,
My message. So as soon as they heard this message, they went back to the train. The train was stationed there, luckily for me. So once they headed back to
station.
the train and they checked, they did find my passport and they did give to me with no hassle whatsoever. And once
They did find my passport. Okay. Yes, we use did in positive sentences, in the simple tenses to emphasize. But I thought it was lost, but they did find it. But they did find it by itself without emphasizing anything as kind of an unnecessary did.
I got my passport, I hurried down back to the airport to board my plane. Luckily, I was
Go on my plane.
just two
Board my
minutes
plane.
before the deadline for boarding my flight. Had I been 2 minutes late, I could not have taken my flight. So in the end, everything turned out to be good, but it was a really worrisome situation for me.
Okay, some final thoughts here on that last bit. Good use of a conditional, uh, and it's better to try to use complex grammar and make a few mistakes than to not
try at all. Sorry about that. I'm having some technical difficulties with the recording, and anyway, I'm still working all this out. So I'm going to finish
Hurried
here
down back to
with
the
going back to
airport
what Rahul
to
said at the
board my
end.
plane. Luckily, I was just 2 minutes before the deadline for boarding my flight. Had I been 2 minutes late, I could not have taken my flight. So in the end, everything turned out to be good, but it was a really worrisome situation for me.
Okay, so again, that little bit of a grammar there. If I had been 2 minutes later, not late, I would not have been able to have caught my flight, or I wouldn't have caught my flight, or I wouldn't have been allowed to. But anyway, third conditional, it's a minor thing. Now, as you can see where my cursor is pointing, it's pointing in this part where you have no checkboxes, and that is in the use of language features. I think that in the speaking tasks, pronunciation is the equivalent of task achievement and task response in the writing section, in that it's often misunderstood about how to score high. There's two things you need to do in pronunciation. First, be clear. You need to pronounce the words correctly and be able to be understood. You can have an accent. Everyone has an accent. But clarity is the first part. Now, the second part is using the pronunciation features that we have in English to do certain things, like intonation. Intonation tells the listener when the sentence is over, like I just did there. You got that down, Rahul. You certainly, you end all of your sentences by your voice going down. That's perfect. However, there's a very even monotone throughout the recording. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm not going to imitate you, but if you listen, your voice is very flat, and it does not really go up or down until the end. And then it goes down. But there is no going up. And that's kind of boring to listen to. But point being is you're not taking advantage of word stress for meaning. That last bit about when you just showed up at the airport in time. Okay, compare. If I had shown up 2 minutes later, I wouldn't have been able to have caught my flight. Note, I'm stressing 2 minutes. If I had been 2 minutes later, I wouldn't have caught my flight. I'm stressing particular words in the sentence because they're important and they convey meaning. In this case, contrast. Same thing with, I can't even read that one. Yeah. Chunking is an aspect of where we put our words together into blocks. Blocks that share meaning. Not just sentences, but ideas. That's called chunking. Watch Captain Kirk on the old Star Trek show. He does a great job. His whole acting approach is about chunking and pauses. I tell my students, teacher, or they ask me, teacher, I don't talk like that. That's not the way I speak. Fine. For the 15 minutes that you're in the test, pretend you are on stage. Pretend you are an actor in a Bollywood film. And ham it up and use high rising stress on the important words and use those features to convey more meaning. It was like if I had been 2 minutes later, we lose part of the meaning of the story. So, on to, look at this. I've moved on to the band descriptors. I would give you an 8 here. Can I move that? Can I see this? No, I can't see any better. 8, 7, 8, 6. 6 for pronunciation, because even though it's clear, you barely show any grammar features. Work on that.